Cathy, and welcome back to our At Home with Cathy series. We are in my house and we're painting all kinds of things that we have in the house as part of the second series, following Annie Sloan's book, The Quick and Easy Paint Transformations for Things Found Around Your House. Well, I don't just find things around the house. These two lamps I found on the side of the road last spring during the cleanup, and I couldn't believe it. I thought the only thing they're missing are the little finials on top, and this one needed to be glued where it had come apart. But I thought for my purposes, for paint purposes, they are perfect. So there wasn't very much to do to get them ready to paint. I've washed them, I've glued this back together, and I did put a little bit of painter's tape inside just to protect the white finish because I'm going to have to paint all the way around. But I struggled with what am I going to do with them? Where do they belong? How do I see these lamps? I don't particularly care for this color. It doesn't fit anything else in my house. I have darker woods, not this lighter sort of wood. And it has a little bit of an orange cast to it, which doesn't excite me either. But I thought the room that I really needed lamps for is our boho room. And our boho room is kind of a riot of colors. It's a bedroom. It's got greens, and it has the boho chair that has every color I couldn't figure out what to do with in the last series. I put on the boho chair. So what I thought I might do with these two, when I took all my color sticks up, was I thought I might do, from one of these projects, a crackle finish on the base to kind of give them an older look. And I'm going to do that in Scandinavian Pink. We'll paint 2 coats of Scandinavian Pink, and on the second coat, we'll put the crackler, and it is a step 1 and step 2 process, but very simple. Takes all the guesswork out of how to make something look crackled. On the shade, we're going to paint that in pink. Oops, I had all my fingers in the right spaces. But we're going to do, so the shade and the lamp shade and the lamp base are going to be in the same Scandinavian Pink. This has kind of a burlap texture on it, so I'm hoping a little bit of that comes through. I don't necessarily want to lose that texture. But I thought what we might do is this simple finish on graphite, just a few little branches to create a little bit more interest on the shade. And the beauty of chalk paint is if we get partway through that process and we think, that doesn't look right at all, we'll come up with something else. But let's get started with our Scandinavian Pink and see how it goes. So I find it a little bit easier when I'm painting something that has a base if I lift it up a little bit. That way my brush isn't dragging around the cloth. So I'm using a wax can. Lamps are pretty fast to paint. This one has a lot of kind of little twists and turns, but you can get around them pretty quickly, especially when you're using one of these beautiful round brushes. And I'm just going to go around very quickly, get the first coat on here. Doesn't have to be a super thick coat. And it's a good thing that I put a little piece of tape, painter's tape on my wire, because I immediately put paint on it. That's just the way it goes. I just wrap a little piece of green painter's tape, or you could use masking tape, just on the wire where it comes into the lamp base, just because that is kind of one of those amateur things to have the paint on that. Just going to quickly go around. I like it when they have the harp on them because you can just pick them right up. Keep going all the way around. You do have to make sure you're getting your paint into all the little nooks and crannies. This is a turned lamp base, so it has little grooves where it was on the lathe. I just want to make sure I get paint into all of that, but it's pretty darn quick to paint. And because it's nicely up on the can, the little wax can, I can just go around and make sure that I have paint all around and no drips. Doesn't really matter if I have brush strokes because I'm going to be crackling it. There we go. First coat done. Now we'll just let it dry and do the second coat. So while the lamp is drying for its first coat, we're going to paint the shade. Now sometimes when I'm painting fabric, I would have watered it down, but this is watered the paint down a little bit so that it's absorbent. But this is, I think, a fairly polyester kind of fabric. It's got a little gold in it, and I think it will go on just fine. The trick is to not let there be too many globs of paint, which is why I'll water it down. But I'll just see how this goes, and if I think it needs to be watered down, that's what we'll do. Yeah, we're going to water it down. You can see there's a thickness right here. That's where there's too much paint. So I want it to be a nice smooth coat. So we're just going to grab some water and make this a little bit watered down so that it goes on more evenly. So I'm going to pour a little bit of my paint into this jar. I like using glass jars. Mason jars are great. Anything that has a lid on it, because then if you need to add more or you need to keep it for later. So it's roughly 1 to 1. Same amount of water as I had paint. I'm going to give it a stir. When you're working with paint that you have diluted, you need to make sure that when you're grabbing it to put it on the actual piece that you keep stirring it. It's like a stain. The solids in it are going to continue to go to the bottom. Okay, so this is better. I'm just going to go around this whole shade and take it from beige and gold to pink. And it will take a little bit while to dry because fabric, of course, is more absorbent and it's going to need to sit and dry. But again, incredibly easy to do. It's pretty straightforward painting. The round bristle brush has split ends all through the bottom of it, and that's one of the reasons it works so well on fabric, is those little split ends actually wiggle right into the grain of your fabric, the weave. And it's nice. I'm getting a little bit of texture coming through from the kind of burlap finish on this shade. Just making sure I get a nice even coat. It's great you have a handle while you're working on it. Go all the way around. It'll take a little bit longer to paint than the lamp base did, just because you have to keep going back over it to make sure you have the same absorption all the way around. Such a great color. If you were painting a shade that had a pattern on it, you might be able to paint the pattern out so that you don't see it when the light is off, but be prepared for that pattern to pop back out. So if you had flowers or something like that that were part of the original shade, they're going to show up as an image, kind of like a shadow effect when you turn the light on, which maybe isn't a bad thing. But when you think about it, most of the time our lamps are sitting unlit, except at night. And maybe mix up a little bit more paint here. I'm always amazed at how much paint goes into fabric, because you wouldn't think that it would go into this much. It's a, you know, the shade has plastic on the back, but fabric really absorbs a lot of paint. And I want this to have good coverage, so I'm just going to mix up a little bit more. Same thing. If I were doing this for something that I couldn't see quite as obviously as I can see when I'm painting the shade, I would be measuring this to make sure that my proportions were the same. But I can pretty much tell from how it covers on the shade if I have it mixed to the right proportions. I love it covers. Almost all the way around. So what I'll do is I can just put a lid on this container, and I will go back and have the paint ready to do my second shade, because I have both the lamps to do. And I will let it dry to make sure that I don't have any sort of bald spots, places where there's less paint, because maybe there was something on the shade. Shades are really hard to clean. You know, not like furniture where you can get your soap and water. Basically all I do is get the dust off them. I don't want to get them wet. They can lose their shape. I get too much water on them. And the harps the metal piece in here, I don't want it, it's just taped in all around, and I don't want to loosen the glue or the adhesive on that tape. So there, I've got my lampshade done all the way around. I'm just going to go around the inside where I've got that tape and just give it a little bit of a brush, because I don't want to see that beige finish from the inside. Just go around here. It's hard to hold on to it. I'm just taking a little bit of the paint off my brush by scraping it down the side of the jar. I don't need a whole lot of paint when I'm doing this, and if I don't get rid of it, I'm just going to end up with drips. There. And we're going to do the same thing along the top. That's why I put the painter's tape there, just to keep it from just going right along, just to get rid of the glitter mostly that was in that fabric. I don't want to see that. And the last part. And then I'll just turn this upside down, put it out in front of the fan, and it will dry pretty quickly. I don't see any missed pieces. Okay, let's put this to dry and see how that lamp base is doing. Okay, so we're going to crackle this lamp base. We're going to do it in a two-stage process. Andy has these crackler 1, crackler 2. Make sure you have the right one open when you're starting. The first one is kind of a white milky liquid. That's crackler 1. Take a small brush. Your paint has to be dry. Won't work if your paint's not dry. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm just going to put a coat of this all the way down. Putting it on exactly the same way as I would do if I were painting. What's going to happen is this, I'm using a little chip brush just because they fit nicely into the top of the crackler jar. And I'm going to make sure I have it completely covered. If I don't have it covered, then anywhere I don't have the crackler, I'm not going to get the chemical reaction when I do the second step. So we're going to put this on, we're going to dry it, let it dry, and then we're going to do the second phase. This is going to dry to a clear, which is kind of nice because it is this milky white, so when it's clear, you know it's dry. All the way down. In my house, we always have the odd cat or dog hair, and that adds a little bit of interest to your project. A little patina. Although for some reason this season, Sawyer's not joining us. He's lying outside on the camera bag. in the hallway. Just going all the way around. What a nice even coat. I think that's just about it. I can see it starting to dry now. Okay, we'll put this to dry and come back in a minute and do the second coat, Crackler 2. So the next thing we're going to do is a little bit of detail on our shade. Didn't that come out beautifully? It's nice and even. It's a gorgeous color. I'm not going to wax it because there is going to be heat from the bulb, but also I don't think it's necessary to wax it when it's on fabric like this. I'm not going to be handling it. The most we're going to do is vacuum it or dust it. But I do want a little bit of detail on the shade. So what I've done, to show you, I've done a strip of wax paper, or a piece of wax paper, and I've just done a little strip of graphite. We're going to try and copy the image, and I probably should get this out because I've never done this before, and I'm going to try and copy what Annie calls cow parsley. I think this is a flower that you find in England, and we have things that are similar, but you can see it's very abstract. And the way she's done this is she's used pieces of cardboard, dipped them in the paint, and then laid them on the dresser, taken the end of something with a point on it like this, and then just done some dots to create the illusion of a flower. So I thought that would be very nice, very simple on this shade. The boho room has a lot of things going on in it. It doesn't need to have a whole lot more color in every single thing that's in the room. So you can get up close here and see the detail on this page. And it's, again, it's not perfect. But what we're going to do is, using the cardboard in different lengths because we want to create that illusion of a stem, I'm going to dip it in my strip of paint, my little stripe of paint, and I'm going to just dab it out so that I get some of the heaviness of the paint off. Then I'm just going to press it. Go back, pick up a little bit more paint, add another stem. I don't want them to be all the same because that's not how flowers grow. I'm going to put one right over here. I'm going to take a shorter piece, and one of the hints in the book, and it's a great hint, is to make sure that you've ripped your cardboard rather than cutting it, because by ripping it I'm going to get a rough edge, so it's not going to be a perfect cut. I'm not going to get that even line that looks artificial. I'm just going to bend this. Actually, I think I'm going to rip it in half again. The piece she did in the book is a dresser, which is quite a bit larger for the images than my lampshade. Turn it around. Eventually your cardboard will get saturated with paint, and you'll move to the next piece. Very simple. Then I'm going to use something round. I know what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the end of this paintbrush because it's round. And I'm just going to do some dots. Some of them will be dark, some of them will be light, some will be perfect circles, some won't. Since the whole boho movement was kind of a celebration of freedom and arts and expression of self, I think this lampshade might be perfect in that room, because this is definitely freedom of expression. Whenever you're doing something, like do a few pieces, do a few lines like this, stand back. I don't have to do the whole shade this way. I might do another little grouping here. They're not going to be perfect, but I'm going to stand back and I'm going to look at it and say, does it look too perfect? Does it look like a sparkler instead of a flower? And if that's the case, I'm probably going to add a little something to kind of redefine it. Don't want it to look perfect. There we go. So we'll let that dry. Actually, what I'll do is keep going all the way around, and we'll see if the crackler 1 is all dry on our lamp, so we can, on the base, so we can do the crackle 2 part. So we did the first step of crackle 1. It's all dry. It's kind of shiny. And what's actually happening with the crackle, because it is a chemical reaction that we're causing, this first coat is bonding to the paint. When I put the second coat on, it's going to create a reaction between the first and the second coats, and because it's bonded to the paint, it's going to pull the paint, so we're going to get a very fine crackle. Sometimes that's a little bit hard to see, so what we'll usually do is do a wash or a dark wax over it to kind of accentuate. I might use, I don't know if I'm going to do a dark, probably, to accentuate the crackle. So this is crackler 2, second paintbrush, and I'm just going to put it on. And as it dries, it'll start to crackle. This isn't necessarily a quick process because it depends on how warm your room is. Putting it on exactly the same way as I did the paint and the first coat of crackle. It's very shiny, so I can kind of tell where I've been. And I'll find out soon enough where I didn't get it, because it won't crackle. If I try to do this before the crackler 1 has dried, I'm just going to mix the two together and I won't get the chemical reaction. Over the whole thing again. It looks kind of gluey. There's a little bit of scent to the crackler 1, a little bit of a smell, kind of a glue smell, but there's really none to the second one. Okay, now we wait. My crackling is coming along nicely. It's very gentle. It's more like a just a breaking of the surface into cracks, a glazing kind of a look. And I can speed it up by using a hairdryer. I can put this out in a nice sunny warm spot to continue crackling, but it will just crackle on its own as the chemical process continues. So we're going to let this sit. It might take 24 hours before it's complete, because now we have 4 coats on here. 2 coats of paint, a coat of crackle number 1, and a coat of crackle number 2. And I want to make sure it's perfectly finished before I do anything else. What I might do when it's all dry is take a little bit of dark wax or a wash of paint, and just maybe even the graphite that we were using on the shade, and just give it a wash or a wipe in the paint, just to show a little bit more definitively where the cracks are. It just creates like a little edge. It frames every crack. So when you come back, we will have this project finished. We will be working on our next projects, but we're hoping you're working on your projects. I invite you to come into the store anytime to discuss what you're doing. Give us a shout, give us a call. Bring your pictures in, bring your piece in, or a part of it if it's too big to carry, and we can talk colors, we can talk styles of paint. We are happy to help you. Looking forward to seeing you at Absolutely Fabulous at Home.